Hi, I'm Sarah Gelman, Editorial Director for Books at Amazon. Today we're joined by a very special guest for this author fishbowl. As the Melissa half of Melissa and Doug, where she is officially co-founder and chief creative officer, Melissa Bernstein has spent 3 decades creating colorful wooden puzzles, plush animals, make-believe kitchens, and countless educational games for the company. Despite a successful business, a happy marriage to Doug spanning more than 30 years, and 6 wonderful kids, the toy maker has grappled with existential anxiety and depression. Now at age 55, Bernstein says she's finally ready to merge her head with her heart. Giving voice to a creativity that was born out of deep despair, Bernstein penned Lifelines, a powerfully raw memoir she hopes will inspire others who are suffering to turn within and transform darkness into light. She considers this book to be her most meaningful thing she's ever created. I have many questions for Melissa, and she'd also love to hear from you. Please submit your questions in the broadcast chat, and we'll get to as many as we can. Melissa, welcome.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, I am so glad to be here. And let me start by saying I create through my hands. I do not often speak through my mouth. So please bear with me. I am a creative misfit introvert. So I'm going to do my best. But
Melissa and we talked in our pre-chat about how we're both very introverted. So this should be very interesting.
But this is surreal because we started working with Amazon in 1999. Wow. We were technically the very first toy on Amazon. So we have worked together for 22 years. I think sold like over $1 billion in product. And for me to be here is the only word I can think is exhilifying, which is one of my own words where I mix exhilarating and terrifying together.
Well, as a parent myself, I feel like you have meant so much to so many parents and kids. And this is a totally different side of you. So first of all, tell us why you wrote this book.
You know, I wrote this book because I got to the point where the cry of my own soul to be seen authentically grew so loud that I couldn't deny it any longer. And although I had spent 32 years, I've spent creating toys, and that truly has been my salvation, channeling this darkness into light and touching children. I was hiding a deep, dark secret, which is that I suffered from this profound despair that really suffused me so many times in my life.
Now, the title of the book is Lifelines, but what are lifelines?
Lifelines have multiple meanings, which I love because words are my everything. But lifelines to me were the verses. So from the time I can remember, as early as I could form words, I've written these verses. They're kind of mantras. They always rhyme. They're anywhere between 4 and 16 lines. And they became my lifelines in a utterly chaotic head of mine that wanted to destroy me at many points. So they became my lifelines. And then lifelines are ultimately those things we turn to keep us steadfast in the face of life's ups and downs.
And we'll talk about the structure of the book later because it is really unique. But these lifelines are sprinkled throughout the book. And it also makes me want to ask my next question, which is when I was reading the book, and I hope one day we meet in person because I feel like I just want to give you a hug, if that's okay. And the story that really broke my heart was when you applied to an MFA program and what happened there. You wanted to get your MFA in poetry. And it's telling, I think, that you call these lifelines and not poems. Can you talk a little bit about what happened there?
Yes. So Doug and I had an incident happen with Melissa and Doug where our only manufacturer decided to copy our products. And we were so morally appalled that we decided we would leave the toy industry and apply to graduate school. And he was going to be a university president. And I thought I would get an MFA in creative writing, specifically poetry. And I needed to submit a body of work to the department. And I did so very tentatively because the truth was I had never shared these verses with anyone. They had stayed tucked away in a dark corner of my drawer for 25 years. So I shared them hoping and terrified at the same time that they would be accepted and I would be seen in my wildest dreams to be an Emily Dickinson, who's my heroine of all time. And unfortunately, I was so tacitly rejected. And basically, the head of the department wrote me a note and said, "Your verses are truly sophomoric and not of the caliber this program demands." And that word sophomoric, I immediately looked it up, although unfortunately I knew what it meant. But the thesaurus words that also meant sophomoric were inane, dim-witted, dumb, foolish, and words that just really destroyed me. Destroyed me to such an extent that I stopped writing verses for the next 25 years.
That's horrible. That story just really breaks my heart. But I guess the silver lining is that you returned to toy making and made so many kids and families happy. And I'm glad that you're back to writing your Lifelines.
Yes, I am too. They finally, I always was in such awe that although I submerged them for 2.5 decades, and thank goodness channeled that same creative philosophy into the simple toys that I made, ultimately they couldn't be repressed any longer. And they just, like a few years ago, they just started surging out of me with a force that I never knew existed in me, to be honest with you. I mean, some days I write 10 of them in one day.
Wow. I mean, you really put your whole self into this book. It's unflinchingly honest. And you write in the book that you've contemplated ending your life several times. What is it like to be that honest with readers and with people that you don't know?
That's why it took me this long, to be honest with you, because for 50 years, I lived a facade. My thoughts and my fears and my feelings were so deep and dark and threatened to submerge me each and every day that the only way I could exist in this world was to deny, repress, and disassociate from them and adopt a facade. And that's what I did. I adopted a facade that allowed me to live in this world. So I think I had to get to the point again where the cry of my soul to be seen, like I had to heed it or I wouldn't be able to live with myself. And I got to the point when I said, you know what? This is who I am. This is the despair that fueled these 10,000 toys. Like I have to share who I am with the world or I won't ever rest easy.
Now, you write about your childhood that you tried really hard to be perfect, and it seems like your parents were never satisfied. You're the mother of 6 children, which is amazing. And I'm curious how that changed your own parenting style.
That's a deep one. I always was conscious of never giving that message to my children because I knew what a burden it was for me. And it was the thing that truly nearly ended my life because that pressure to be perfect, I couldn't maintain it. And ultimately, I did collapse from that burden. So I never made them think that they had to achieve to be loved by me. However, perfectionism is insidious. And although on the outside, I worked my hardest to never give that impression, the truth was on the inside, I still felt it. I still wanted them to be perfect desperately. And I still felt terribly worthless when they weren't perfect. So it was this horrible paradox. On the outside, I was giving this impression that it was all cool, and if they failed, no big deal. And on the inside, I was terrified of them failing. And I think it was because I hadn't yet accepted my own imperfection and the fact that I was imperfect. So until I did that, I couldn't accept anybody else's imperfection either.
Have your kids read this book now?
They have. I would say 4 of them have read it.
And what was their reaction?
It's almost unreal. It's been really incredible. In fact, 2 of our daughters are part of Lifelines. So it's really been impactful. And I think it's definitely changed the way they see me in both a good and a bad way. Because to be honest, I was really, like I said, I was just a facade for so long. And if you look at an emotional spectrum, I was one emotion. I was at the very top and I was great, perfect, fine, nothing else. I had no emotion other than great. So I think they saw me as very robotic and stoic and always there, but not as a real person. And this really allowed them to see me as sort of the full spectrum of emotion for the very first time.
I know you have kids varying in ages, and I feel like you really start to grow up when you see your parents as human beings with flaws and preferences. And I mean, I feel like this is a gift that you can give them by laying it all out too. So I'm sure that they're very happy about that.
Yeah. And, it's interesting because my biggest flaw as a parent has been that I want to fix people. And, even though myself, when people tried to fix me and wanted me to get better, it was the worst thing possible because I was like, no, I'm in despair. Like, don't try to fix me. Fascinatingly, I did the exact same thing with my kids. And whenever they were struggling in any way, I wanted to immediately find the problem and fix it. And it became a real problem with some of my daughters because I wasn't able to truly hear them in their pain. And I think it was because my own pain was so great that I knew I would never emerge. I would drown if I allowed myself to wallow. So I couldn't tolerate anyone else wallowing either. So again, as they've read my story and understand why I feel this way, I think that it's enabled them to see me as human, as you said, and maybe empathize with me a little bit more for being that way and not being able to hear them.
I'm sure. I found so much in this book that will relate to anyone that suffers from mental health issues or knows someone that does, but there are labels that we give people, like you've mentioned, perfectionist or pleaser, that definitely resonated with me, and I feel like will resonate with a lot of Amazon employees. We tend to be a certain type. So what would you say is your audience for this book? Is it people that find that in themselves or someone else?
Wow, that's a great question. I think it's anyone who's reached that crossroads in their life where they're saying, you know what? Something is missing. Like, I have been racing my entire life, running this futile race, and I'm no closer to finding meaning or fulfillment than I've ever been. So something has to change. So it's those who have that little bit of curiosity and self-awareness to know that the journey might have to change. Instead of being out there toward everything they've been searching for outside themselves, that it might have to actually go inside for the very first time. I think it's those people because it is pretty raw and it's very honest. And I feel like you have to be at that point where you're ready to look inside and find those places in yourself as well.
I feel like everyone I've spoken to during this time, we've been quarantined for about a year, is looking inside themselves right now. So I feel like it's the perfect time to read this and really kind of figure out what's going on. Now, one theme that I noticed in the book was compassion. And I mentioned I'm the mom of 2 young boys, and I feel like the best compliment I could get is that they're compassionate humans. How do you feel like we can foster a culture of compassion?
That's beautiful. I think it starts with accepting that we are a full spectrum of emotion and we are imperfect by being human. Our culture, we're born showing everything, right? We cry when we're hungry, we laugh, we show it all. But very early on, society starts putting us in this box. And I believe that we feel that we can't show who we truly are. And it's so tragic. And I know that happened with me. I suddenly was like, I can't be who I am because I have to stop crying. I have to wipe my tears. I have to be strong. I have to, fight through. And sort of these messages that I got basically said, no matter what, keep that smile on your face. Don't show how you're feeling. Hide your deepest, darkest feelings. And I believe almost all of us feel that from very early on. And it means we don't ever learn to accept who we are. We try to be who society is telling us to be. So in order to build compassion toward others, we have to first find compassion toward ourselves and accept ourselves in everything, in the whole spectrum and paradox of all our feelings, dark, light, happy, sad, the whole thing.
I totally agree with that. Love the idea of emotion coaching. I don't know if you've looked at that for little kids and just not saying like, don't be afraid, don't cry, but like, it is okay to feel these things. It's just, yes, we are taught to like push all of that down, and it just, it's harmful, I think.
It is. And, repression leads to depression. I have a verse about that. I mean, you cannot deny yourself and not end up feeling really, really depressed because we're all we've got, and when you deny who you truly are and what you're feeling, and for me, it was all my eccentricities as well. Like it was just denying everything I was and everything I felt. You can't help but become really depressed because you're not being who you are. You can't meet people and really forge real friendships because you're not who you are. So nothing works, nothing flows when you're in denial.
Now you are a superstar in my house with my two kids and us parents, and you're very well known as Melissa from Melissa and Doug. How would you say that you've channeled your own suffering and introspection into creating these joyful objects for children?
Oh, that is the best question. So, creativity is my number one lifeline. And I think I had this profound ability to breathe for the very first time when I realized at about age 25 that I had a choice. Because for the first 25 years of my life, I had created innately, always, music and verses, but they were so dark and despairing that I never let them see the light. I hid them away where no one could ever see them. But when Doug and I started Melissa and Doug, and I created our very first line of puzzles, I realized I call it shalation, shock and elation, that I actually had a choice. And my creativity was like a faucet. And one side of it was dark. And for all these years, the light side was turned off, the dark side was turned on, and I had channeled the despair into more darkness through creativity, and it stayed darkness. And because of that, I never found meaning through it. But suddenly with the toys, I realized, oh my goodness, I can turn off the dark faucet. I can turn on the light faucet. I can still channel that exact same despair into light through making toys. And now these toys can actually touch children, no less, and bring them, joy and play and ignite their imaginations. And I can actually find meaning through that. So it was the first time that I realized that I had the power, and I write a verse, we alone possess the power to live life forevermore, brokenhearted in a cell or walk right through the open door. And I realized that the door to my cell was always open. I just never knew that. I had thought I was imprisoned forever. And the minute I turned off that dark faucet and turned on the light, I started creating meaning. And that also became my number one lifeline, my mantra for my life, which is step on out of the head, moving into the heart, free to channel all dread into jubilant art. So I made this concerted effort to take everything here that was dark and wanted to, submerge me in its ugliness and channel it down here, but then channel it into jubilant art and make that choice every single day to not get stuck in my head and move completely into my heart.
The way that you were talking about words and how you love words so much, I feel like I'm that way with symbolism, just as a lifelong reader. And the symbolism of you taking your pain and pouring it into joy for other families just is not lost on me. And the fact that it is literally your signature that spells out Melissa and Doug, and just that literal stamp in, I'm sure every parent listening has at least one of your toys in their playroom or their kitchen or their kid's bedroom, and a piece of you is there with them. It's really touching.
So there's this Greek word called meiraki, which is, and I always, probably the biggest compliment people ever gave our toys is when they said, there's something about your toys that seems alive. Like there's something, and I would get very emotional because it was so true. And meiraki is where you give everything of yourself into something and leave a little piece of yourself in every single thing you create. And that's what I believe I do. I was truly channeling everything into these toys. And when I create them, I am absolutely leaving a piece of myself in them. So the fact that, and I think of them, I live in my imagination. So I think of them as, I know it sounds really weird. People will think I'm even weirder than they already do. I think of them as alive. Like, it's true to me, they are like the Nutcracker toys, and they live and they breathe. So that's a great compliment, because it is truly what I've done.
That's not weird. If anyone thinks it's weird, they can talk to me about it. But I mean, for children, that's true. Their toys are alive. They're there, like, picking up the sushi and slicing the fruit and putting on the fireman hat. I mean, that really is, that's how children find joy and learn about the world. So I don't think that's silly at all.
I agree.
Yeah. Now, back to the book. I noticed that it's not broken into chapters, which is sort of typical of a book, but it's in volumes. And each volume has a title. Now, did you intend for readers to read the whole way through, or sort of dip in and out depending on what they're needing?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, so it became volumes because, and this is going back, sort of answering your question. When I thought about what I wanted this book to be, I knew it had to be based around my verses that had been hiding, 3,000 of them, I think I had, hiding in the shadows for all these years, never seeing light. And those verses were my soul. Those verses really depicted every single question, despairing moment, incongruity, hypocrisy that I've ever felt. Those verses have helped me to answer. So I knew I wanted the book to be around those verses. And when I divided them out, there were exactly 300 verses in 11 sections. Very distinct and very different. And I think, yes, each one could be read on its own. They were meant to sort of connect, but not necessarily. So I think they're all separate, and they're all pieces of me, because those verses are the things that I call them the shattered pieces of my soul that were just sort of floating out there, very disintegrated, and needed to reintegrate in order to make me whole.
Well, as I was reading the book, I was underlining and starring, and I like stick index cards into books and make notes on them. And I underlined this one line that really, I think at the end of the book, was probably the line that meant the most to me. So I wanted to read it. You write, "I finally came to see that the only aspects of existence I could actually control were the attitude by which I greeted each day, the specific actions I took to live a meaningful life, and the manner by which I responded to and treated those around me." I feel like that really, especially right now in February 2021, it just struck me as so poignant. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Oh, I would love to. So, I've really traveled quite an interesting path, from really being very despairing and believing that there was no meaning and humans couldn't find meaning, to where I am today, which is completely the opposite. Like, this is a story of hope, because I have taken darkness so deep that I thought I would never emerge. And through having the awareness, having the free will to make the choice, and having the personal responsibility to committing myself to making meaning for myself and engaging in life, I have transferred all that darkness into light. And I think that is, if there's one message in that book and in my life now, it's, I promise we all have the ability to turn our darkness into light. It's very much about kindling those sparks within and igniting them into a bonfire that you can share with the world. It's engaging in experiences through your relationships, through your love of nature and art and beauty. And it's our attitude. That's the third one. It's our attitude, which says we can play the victim, we can blame, we can shame, or we can transcend ourselves, transcend the prison of our mind, and take responsibility for our lives and engage in something that puts us squarely in the flow of life. And that is what I determined to do. And that is what my goal is now, to shine the light on others and show them that they can do that as well.
I love that message. Now, in the volume Possibility, you reach this pivotal point and you actually write a letter to yourself. What was the pivotal point and what happened there?
Yeah. So the pivotal point was so there are two really main dots in my life. One is when Doug and I started Melissa and Doug, and I realized that I could turn off the dark faucet and turn on the light and create toys. I've done that for 32 years, and it's been profoundly blissful and absolutely my salvation, because the creativity and the despair had meaning, right? Because it now could touch people and bring them joy. But the second was when, about 5 years ago, I realized that I was still very empty inside, because although I had found tremendous salvation in creating toys, I still was denying all the despair that created those toys, and I had never accepted who I was in all my hypersensitivities. So that was when I finally admitted that I needed professional help, which perfectionists don't do, because I was too perfect to admit I needed help. And I got the help of a great professional who helped me take this journey inward. And that journey inward has been the most profound expedition of my life. I'm still on it. So I'm not quite out yet, but for the first time, I went in and I really had to stare that emptiness, that nothingness in the eye, and learn to be okay with every spectrum, every one of those emotions along my emotional spectrum, and allow everything to flow through me. And I think once I was able to stand as witness to my head and see it as a prison, and really a lot of times telling me things that aren't true, everything changed. And I was able to finally accept myself in totality, which has been nothing short of revelatory, because all my despair really lifted. Once I was able to say, this is who you are, you are blessed, your blessing is your curse. And that's another mashup. And, if you want to be a creative who creates from thin air, well, guess what? You're going to have a pretty hypersensitive personality, and that's just how it is. And I was like, okay, creating for me there's nothing more intoxicating. It is pure rapture, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. So if I have to have this personality that goes to some pretty dark, places, then bring it on. I am not giving that up. So that was where I reached this point where I was like, okay, you accept yourself. You're no longer wallowing. You're no longer shaming yourself. And now it's about taking ownership. Now it's about saying, this is who this is who you are. I'm accepting myself, and I'm going to make the most out of my life.
It's funny, when I interview especially successful women, I always ask them sort of, how do you do it all? And I'm not going to ask you that, because I know how you do it all. It's all in here. But when you talk, I could name all of your accomplishments. We've talked about a couple: wife, mother of 6 kids, super successful toy company, now this creator of Lifelines. But one thing that I noticed in the book is that you seem to be very passionate about making earrings. And I did a little Google search to see if I could find your Melissa earring company, and I didn't. So I know this is something that's a little more private. Can you talk about it?
Oh my gosh, yes. So I think, the reason you didn't see anything on it, and I really debated many points selling them, but I feel like a lot of times when we make something about the result and the effort and about money and about selling a lot, especially me, it goes right up here. And suddenly it becomes much more about the result and how many am I going to sell and how much am I going to make? And it loses the joy that's right in the heart. Playing is something you do for nothing other than the joy of doing it. And I was determined to keep my earrings about play and about really doing it for fun. And that way, when I'm making them, because I'm so self-critical, I have to be honest, when I'm making them, I'm not thinking oh, this isn't as nice as the ones I just saw yesterday, on Amazon. So I don't want to be thinking that. I want to do it just because I want to do it, and it brings me joy. So yes, I could sell them. I give them away to people, and I love doing it more than anything. It's just a form of self-expression that isn't my vocation, and I really enjoy that.
You also, adding to your list of credentials, I think you took all the beautiful photographs in this book. And the book, yeah, the book itself is a work of art. Can you talk about the photographs and also just the design process for the book?
Yes. Oh my gosh. I'm so glad you mentioned that. So, this was a product like all our other products, and we didn't want to make it like all our other products. We wanted to make it really special. And we thought, who has combined three books in one? Who has combined, a memoir with a photography book, with a book of verses? Like, not many people. And also, who has put it out at a price that is like incredibly low for a coffee table type book? And we were like, we're going to do something. So Doug and we get so excited about, breaking convention and bucking the norm and bringing something to market that should be maybe $50 to $60, but isn't. And just making this something that's just more than your average book. So that if someone maybe didn't want to read the memoir, they could look at the photographs. If somebody doesn't like photographs, they could read the verses. So it gives a lot of options for people to hopefully get a little bit of joy out of it.
I am just going to point out, we talked about this earlier, sometimes my cat jumps up here. And I'm only doing this because we talked a lot about animals beforehand, and I said, sometimes my cat curls up on me. So
That's so cute. That's one of my lifelines, my 3 furry friends.
This isn't really a good time right now. Here, this is Rocco. He really likes to snuggle. Sorry about that. I usually contain him, but I felt like we were just talking about that. So,
I love that. And that is a lifeline. They bring us so much comfort and joy.
I do love my pets. They're constantly, if it's not like a child, you can sit next to me. If it's not a child, it's an animal crawling on me, but they do bring me a lot of joy. And I know we bonded about our pets before. Okay, he's done. Now, sorry, I'm getting serious. I've never let the cat crawl up on my lap while I've been doing one of these, but I felt like
the first. I love to be parts of new things.
So, okay, I'm getting serious again. Serious face.
This is good. That where convention ends, creativity begins. Yay!
Exactly. I like for people to see that, like, this is my living room. It is empty of furniture except for this couch, and sometimes the cat crawls up on me. This is just what working at home is like.
Exactly.
Now, if we do suspect someone in our life is dealing with mental illness, depression, anxiety, how can you, as a friend and an ally, reach out to them and support them?
I mean, I'm not a professional, but I'm thinking about myself and what I needed more than anything, which, by the way, I never got, certainly not as a child, which was someone to just hear me and not want me to get better, and just accept me for exactly the way I'm feeling right now, and just be there for me. They don't have to try to fix it. They don't have to try to change me. They just have to say, I hear you, and I'm here for you, and I support you. And maybe just like hold my hand really tight. I think we want to know that we're okay, and that we're going to be okay, and that even though we're in a really low place. And you don't want someone to say it's going to get better, because you don't know how I'm feeling. And maybe in my mind, it's not going to get better. Like maybe I'm at my real low. So I think you just want someone to, at least I would want someone to just accept me exactly as I'm feeling. And usually, even today, a few months ago was the very first time in my entire life that I was able to say the words, I feel sad today, which is crazy. I mean, 50 plus years old, and I was never had the courage to say those 4 words. And, Doug has become so amazing at dealing with me, because when I say that, he just is like, okay. And he just kind of, lets me be. And inevitably, by the middle of the day, I'm not sad anymore. The minute I allow myself to feel the way I'm feeling and I don't deny and repress it, it's so weird. I almost still can't believe it. It actually like passes. And then I'm just back to the way I am. And then I go back down. And, we're all just an ebb and flow of emotion. We're just human, which that is being human. But so many of us, I think, the minute we go to a low place, we start to panic, right? We go into our heads and we're like, oh, this means it. This means it's over. Like, I'm never going to come back up, as opposed to just accepting it. And then I think many of us, it would just naturally go back on up.
It's such a good reminder when you were talking about wanting to fix your kids' problems. I feel like I know I'm like that. I know a lot of my friends are like that too. And it's such a good reminder to just kind of sit with people in their own discomfort and remind them that you're there rather than needing to fix every problem that they have.
Yeah. And to know that it should be so normal for someone to be able to say, I feel sad today. Yet
Yeah.
I really still believe in our society that most of us would never say that to anybody.
Yeah. Or if we do, it would make them very uncomfortable.
Exactly. And it takes two, right? It takes us to have the courage to say how we're feeling. And then unfortunately, it takes the other side to be able to rise up and meet us there and be okay with that. So yes, even when I had the courage a few times in my childhood to tell people how I was feeling, their reaction was so stigmatizing and so shocked that I would feel that way that I immediately retreated right back into my shell and never showed my truth again.
Right. Well, we have some audience questions that I promised I would ask. So Amy says, playing with my daughter with your toys has been one of the ways I cope with my depression. Thank you. How have you handled teaching your kids about your depression?
Oh, that's such a great question. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm just starting to do that because this journey is a new one, but I think it's just being totally honest. And this book was the start. Nobody knew about this. This book was really the first time, 50 years old plus, that I came out and told people what I was suffering with. And, the amazing thing, and I still am so happy, like they haven't changed. They still complain and they still need me to do everything. And that makes me so happy because I didn't want it to change the way they saw me. I think I was so worried that they'd see me as this depressed person and it would color the way they dealt with me, but nothing's changed. So I think it's having the courage to just be honest and say, mommy's having a rough day today. I feel really sad, but I'm going to, maybe tomorrow I won't. So I think it's showing them the truth of life. And the more we can do that with our kids, the more they won't be scared to do the same. So I truly now believe in radical honesty, and it has to start from a very young age. And now I even talk openly like, oh, I'm going to my therapist today. I would have never shared that. Like, it meant to me I was flawed and couldn't share that with people. Now it's like, oh, I have my therapy appointment tomorrow, and like I'll go to it and I'll say, wow, I had a really good appointment today. We talked about some pretty cool things. So I think the more I can feel comfortable doing this, and we as society can feel comfortable talking about the truth that all of us experience, the better it'll be.
And it really does. I think it fosters empathy with kids too. And the times that I've said to my older son, I remember one weekend I said, mommy has an upset stomach, and he came and kissed my stomach and checked in with me. And I mean, I sort of laughed, I think I faked it a little longer because I was like, he's being so sweet. But yeah, it really does just foster this sense of empathy in kids too.
What you just said is so important. I agree. Like, I had this need to not be seen as human. I felt like I needed to be this superwoman who never showed a chink in her armor. And that was the face I wanted to give the world. Like, I would serve unmercifully and serve myself into the ground before anyone would see me as human. And I realized that why would anybody want that to be the face they show? And I never got empathy. And of course, no one ever showed me it because I never showed it to myself and never asked for it. So I agree. Amy, that's such a good question. Like, the more we can show that we're human and we're imperfect, the more our kids will show that example in the world themselves too.
Well, this is just a comment from L. She or he says, compassion and acceptance of ourselves. Thanks for this reminder, Melissa. That's nice. Now, Marina asks, depression and anxiety mood swings can be quite cyclical. How do you elevate yourself out of your darkest moments?
Oh, that was almost like a question that was planned. So that begs the question that we ask our community what are your lifelines? Because our lifelines are those things that help us bear through life's ups and downs. And what I've realized, once I accepted my full emotional spectrum, I realized that I vacillate really extremely. I mean, I'm like this, up, down, up, down, up, down. And how am I going to help myself to remain steadfast, equanimously in the middle during those lows? And that became my practice. So now I have this really firm practice that I do every single day. And the thing about a practice that I know now is you have to do it, especially in the good times. You have to do it, especially when you're high, because it has to become so routine that when you fall low and your tendency would be to just go under the covers and never come out, that's when you have to keep doing it. So a practice can be all those things that are right here that bring you in your heart and out of your head and make you truly live. And I'll give a few for me. Creativity, obviously writing verses is number one. Walking in nature is something I do every single day, no matter what the weather is with Doug. What else? Playing with my pets is absolutely a lifeline. Drinking tea, listening to music. So we can develop our own practice that we must practice. That's why it's called practice, so that when we need it the most, it's right there in our hip pocket to pull out and use.
I'm totally with you on walking in nature every day. It is such a salvation. I love hearing you use the word equanimous too, because it's a word that you talk about in the book. And you're such a word fan, which I am too. And I always want to know the meanings of words, and it's a good one. So for the word fans out there as well. Okay. Dorothy asked a question that I actually wanted to ask myself. So thank you, Dorothy. Is there a toy that you've created that you're especially proud of?
Wow. So I think I'll talk about the category because it's my favorite category and everything in it is so close to my heart. And it's our pretend play. Pretend play is the nearest and dearest to my heart because as children, I feel like our job is to prepare for adulthood in a really safe way where we can continually fail and make mistakes and try on new personas for size and see if they fit and then say, oh, I don't like this one. And I feel like through our pretend play, we've done such a cool job of that. And I'll give you an example. I think my favorite pretend play line is our pet care line.
Oh, yeah.
And
we have the vet set. I love that.
Yes. And that came out of watching my own kids. Before we had pets, before we gave in and succumbed to having pets, my kids used to treat their stuffed animals like they were real pets and truly like put them to bed, feed them, care for them, take them to the doctor. And I saw that and it sort of, that was the first spark. I said, for all those kids who can't have real pets, we should create some sets that allow them to take care of their pretend pets as if they're real. Or maybe it even becomes the precursor to having a real pet. You say to your children, if you can take care of your pretend pet for a year, we'll get a real pet. So that little seed of curiosity and that seed of, maybe we could make this line was really the germ of that product line. And it's been really a well-received line, which makes me so, so happy.
Well, we love our vet set, and my little sister who's a teacher got it for me. So, or for me, for my kids, sort of for me. Last audience question. I also love this question. Jordan asks, what ideas do you have for non-creative people working with creative people?
Oh, wow. That's a tough one. Well, so I would say it's going to be the same argument between the head versus the heart. And it's to know that creative people are dogmatic, passionate, opinionated, and highly excitable. And I think those who aren't are much more rational and in their heads. And sometimes the two can really conflict. But as long as you can understand that the reason they're so passionate isn't because they're trying to be difficult, it's because when they see something in their heads and when they feel it, it's like something comes over them that they can't even control. So I would say try, the best thing we can always do is try to understand the other And I've had to do the same. You could ask me the opposite with those financial types. I've had such a hard time, to be honest with you, dealing with them because everything is like so black and white, and I don't even have a box. Like they always say, are you in the box or out of the box? Like Melissa doesn't even have a box. So I think it's trying to understand the other. If we're creative, understanding that that's how they live. They live in the left side of their brain. And that brain is very formulaic and structured, and that's good. We all need some structure. But then the corollary for those folks is that we as creatives may not even have a box, and we're living in the boundlessness, expansiveness of our imagination. And that's just where we live. So we're going to have to understand each other to better come together.
Thank you. Now, last question from me. I know that you've poured a ton of yourself into the online community, lifelines.com. Can you tell us a bit more about it?
Yes. So, the book was really just my personal story and my bid for acceptance finally as who I truly am. But lifelines.com is so much more. And it's based on three core tenets. The first is you are not alone and you're not alone. You've got your pet there, Rocco. So we know Sarah's not alone, but you are not alone because I grew up feeling so stigmatized and so alone, and that I was like on this island by myself. And I now know, now that I've had the courage to show who I am, I now know that I'm not alone. Like there are actually a lot of folks suffering the same affliction I am, and I want to show others that they are not alone either. So that's the first. The second is we all have the ability to channel our darkness into light, and we are going to show others how they harness those innate sparks within them and kindle them into a bonfire so it can touch others and give their lives meaning. And then the third is that we will not find peace or fulfillment until we stop racing out there and make that journey inward and accept ourselves in totality. And our whole ecosystem is based around this journey that you take free. By the way, this whole thing is free. Doug and I have been so fortunate with toys that we want to give this back. And this journey is a journey you take to really unearth who you truly are and sort of put those pieces of yourself back together so you can be whole and fully integrated.
Well, it's a beautiful website and experience, and I encourage everyone to check it out. It's lifelines.com, and I believe your social handles are Seek Lifeline, correct?
Yes, and I'm Melissa Bernstein Official.
I'm following you now. And the book goes on sale March 16th. It's available to pre-order now on Amazon, and everyone should do that. Melissa, thank you so much for your time today, for your honesty, for all the work you put into toys, and I hope one day we get to talk in person, but until then, thank you again.
Well, thank you. You have spread the message that open-ended play matters for 22 years for us, and the fact that we can now work together to spread this other message that no one is alone, who would ever be so fortunate? So thank you so, so much.
Thank you again. Okay, everyone, bye.